Hi, everyone. I am Jess Smith, and this is the Career Calling Summit. And today we're speaking with Kira Day. Welcome.
Hi, Jess. So excited to be here. Hey, guys.
We're so excited to have you. So, Kira is the founder of the Passion Center, a company that fills the gap that many feel when it comes to focusing on their work and their passions. Kira is insanely passionate about helping people to see themselves correctly without self imposed biases, limiting beliefs, fears, and societal conditioning. Her programs are used to help people find their own individual compass and use that to launch new careers, passion ventures, side hustles, higher purpose missions, and much, much more. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, is passion and how this plays out in people's lives and what it looks like. So, Kira, I know that your philosophy on passion is that it's not actually an elusive concept and it's actually just a big piece of who you are. So would love to start off with having you tell us a little bit about what your idea of passion is and what that means.
Yeah, so this one actually was a more recent revelation and why I decided to call my company the Passion Center to begin with. I think I, like many of the population, have had a very complex relationship with my own passion. And for a very long time, it was like, oh, well, am I passionate about this? Am I passionate about that? How do I find my passion? I think the biggest symptom of that is that it's a word that is so overused in society that we just dulled its meaning over time. So we don't actually know what it means anymore. We just think that we know when other people are passionate. We're like, yeah, I want some of that. How do we get that? And so I think, what I've discovered is that it's less about passion and more about what is intrinsically meaningful to you. And if I had to put it in a really, really simple formula, I think passion will be simply this. It's meaning, finding things that are meaningful to you, times investment, doing those things over time, and that ignites passion. So I think, right now we're in a culture where everyone's like, oh my gosh, we're putting all of this emphasis on this one thing, but it's like we miss the boat when we put all of our emphasis on that. It's like happiness, if we all went around looking for happiness, or even like if we were to call or consider that passion is an emotion like any other emotions, we don't go around saying, how do I find anger? How do I find no, right? You have situations that trigger that and ignite that in you. So that's the same thing is applied to passion. It's just really dumbing it down and focusing on those things. And that as a symptom is where passion kind of is found.
Yeah, cool. And so you kind of started to touch on this, but I think that if you were to ask a lot of people, hey, what are you passionate about? There, a lot of people will be like, I don't actually know. And why does that happen?
So this actually is more of a systemic problem than it is a personal problem. Like when you consider like going through the education system, when you consider finding a job, like think about how that is institutionalized. You go to this place and someone else tells you what you should know. Someone else tells you how you should learn it or what the best ways. And then we grade you and judge you as a result of how well you learn it, right?
Yeah.
Not That's not helping anybody find what intrinsically drives them. We've moved away from trying to really have those deeper conversations, those deeper, meaningful conversations. But when you start unpacking that and really going into the depth of who you are as a core individual and find those differences and those uniquenesses about who you are, what you'll find is there's messages in there. It's like your coded DNA. And once you understand, again, going back to the meaningful conversation, once you understand how your unique makeup is designed, and we extrapolate the things that are individually meaningful to you, that's how, and then you obviously activate on it or go out and do it more and more. That's really how you're going to find passion. You're not going to just find it sitting down and being like, oh, what's my passion? It's not that kind of exercise. It's a little different. And that's the stuff that we really kind of go through and mature at the Passion Center.
Yeah. And so one thing that I had wanted to ask, and it kind of plays right into that is, is passion something that you discover or is it something that you create? And I feel like it sounds like it's kind of a mix of both.
Yeah, so I think that you are what you discover, right?
Yeah.
And the application or the expression of you is really how passion is. I would say it's activated. It's not created.
Okay.
Activated means it's a verb. Like you've got to go out there and actively do something that will ignite those emotions. I relate it a lot to, because our body chemistries are designed just the same. Like if you want to get into the science section, it's designed just the same. So if I, for example, meet someone new for the first time, and this person, I might see that there's an interest, or I might have a curiosity, or there's something interesting about them that, all by the way, is interesting to me and personal to me because of how I'm wired, my sociological impacts, my environment, my biology, all that kind of stuff plays into it. It's really beautifully complex. And then, but I'm not like in love with that person overnight. And I'm certainly not in love with that person at that first meeting. How I know love for that person is by constant bonding and like really getting to know them and spending the time and investing that time with that person. I would say the same thing is true for passion, only instead of it being a person, it's an object, an activity, thing, right? So the more I do that thing that's curious to me, that's interesting to me, the more I invest time, the more value is going to be added to that thing. And that is the occurrence of how passion is activated.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I'm thinking, so I am a little bit of an artist. I like to paint and make dream catchers and different weavings and stuff. And I know that that was something that kind of grew over time for me. I wasn't like immediately in love with it, exactly like you said. Like I was obviously intrigued. It was like the more time that I spent doing it, I was like, wow, I like this makes me really happy to work on stuff.
Well, that's because you're wiring your brain
Mhm.
to be more happy, right? Like there's
Yeah.
there's a reward center in the brain, and that's the center that kind of rewards us for doing something that we like. So whether that's like, being around people, whether that's familial bonding, whether that's doing an activity, like these are your body's like, and I think that should just be so fascinating. Like your body has literally been designed in such a way where you feel good for doing work. Like
Yeah.
like nature did that. That's pretty phenomenal to me. And I think the more that we invest in that stuff, the better it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
I say this to people all the time. Like I can have, for example, 5 artists, right? And 5 people who love art and are passionate about art, let's even say. But I challenge you to consider that it's not so much about what it is you're actually passionate about, it's about why you're passionate. So those 5 different people could have very different reasons for
Mhm.
why they're passionate about that same thing, right? So
Yeah.
it might be this creative expression or whatever. For someone else, it could be just a memory from earlier childhood that really, ignited that feeling, and they always kind of return to that when they paint. Or for someone else, it could be just like getting out some emotion and like really kind of working intrinsically. Like it's such a it's so cool to just get underneath the belly of
Mhm.
passion and like why we're passionate about certain things.
Yeah. And so tell me how authenticity plays into this.
Well, when we think about like getting to the core of ourselves and what we find meaningful,
Mhm.
that is a very authentic process in entirety, right?
Yeah.
We've got to uncouple what society expects of us. We got to uncouple what our family expects of us. We have to uncouple what our friends expect from us, and we have to find what we expect for ourselves. That's the true
Mhm.
relationship with what we find meaningful and what we find passion in. You really can't be passionate about something um, that is not a true expression of your being or your nature. It's so engineered intrinsically to who you are that there is no other way but to be authentic with a passion, really.
Yeah. And so you mentioned, it's letting go of what your family expects, what your friends expect. How can people start to let go of those things? Because I think that's something that oftentimes puts us in boxes and is very hard to get out of.
100%. And I mean, like, there is a methodology to this. We are intrinsically designed to adapt, especially sociologically. Like, that is our tribe. And for a very long time in our evolutionary history, if we were to separate from that tribe, we'd be dead. So there's a lot of protecting protocols that goes on in your body and in your brain to help ensure that you don't do anything to alienate yourself
Mm.
from the survival metrics of the group. But now we're in such a different cultural climate that this is, I think a 21st century thing. Like everyone has that same question. It's how do I find what's intrinsically mine? And really, that's done through guided introspection. Guided introspection with an expert that's not yourself and not your friend, because you and your
Yeah.
friend have biases about who you are. So you need an objective lens to ask very specific questions and go down the rabbit hole in many ways of
Mhm.
different ideas and ideologies and values that you think you have, so that
Yeah.
we can couple those things. So we can separate what's been adopted and what's actually intrinsically a choice that you've made that says, yes, this is something that feels right. So
Mhm.
again, it's about getting outside of your head and getting into your body, because there's so much sophistication in the way that we're wired that's not a part of just the brain that
Yeah.
pay more attention to, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if you have any other things that you want to speak on, but I love that you said it's about getting into your body. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Well, I mean, when we think about what we glorify culturally, we're always we have a high regard for rationale, for logic, and for the brain's function. This is like a whole other conversation, but because of that, we've actually separated ourselves from some of the other intelligent systems that are going on in our bodies. Have you ever heard of heart math?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so that's a whole other episode. But Google and type in heart math. I think that it's the
Okay.
Mayo that's done it. And it talks about just the electromagnetic fields and the information that's sent from your body through your heart center.
Okay.
So it's like understanding things like your intuition, understanding your feelings again, getting in tune with your emotions, because that's your body's feedback system, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, and this and someone to work with you on, but it's really about understanding and getting reconnected with your intuition and moving the mind and quieting the mind and getting it out of the way so that you can really feel through some of these exercises. Because again, passion isn't a thinking process, and it's
Mhm.
not something that you're going to think yourself in. There's a logical flow, but it's the understanding of what that flow is in order to activate those types of processes. And the number one thing is to try the best you can to actively go out and do the things that are meaningful to you. And then, of course, finding again that center place where you can reconnect with things like your intuition and your emotions and feel yourself through it, because there's a ton of intelligence that's happening there that's the subconscious, not the conscious.
Yeah, that's great. And so, how long does it take people to figure out what they're passionate about? And I know that this ranges, but I'm curious a little bit about, for the people who maybe haven't figured out what they're passionate about, what can they kind of realistically expect?
So I mean, it's a process, but and it can take a long time if you don't know what you're looking for. So
Mhm.
what we've done at the Passion Center, for example, is we've taken a lot of the best practices. We've taken like over thousands of research papers on this stuff, and we've done a lot of experiments and things like that to come to the top things to get you from unclarity to clarity in the shortest period of time possible. So again, I don't focus on the what. The what
Mhm.
less important. I focus on the why. Because if
Yeah.
you understand the why, then I can have a range of things that you could actually be passionate about, other than just narrowing our focus to this one thing. Passion is a very multidimensional thing that again encompasses a lot of the things we find meaningful. So getting to the undercore of like, what are things that intrinsically drives you? What are those values that sits underneath those expectations, right? What are your personal curiosities and your interests? What attracts you? What is your optimal states and what represents those optimal states? And it's really kind of going through some of those very structured questions to
Mhm.
unpack those things. And I mean, I've had people go from like a 1 day class and a 1 hour session, and we were very clear on what they needed to do in order to activate
Oh,
their passions. So it's actually not as long and complex as we think. It's just we don't have the right resources to help us on that journey. So we're all just reinventing the wheel, right? And it's not like this is something that they teach you in school either. So there's a lot of information, but that does not mean that there's a lot of information that's not out there. It's just streamlining it and helping guide you through what those things are and how you can get to it.
Yeah, once you know where to look, it becomes a lot easier. That totally makes sense. Cool. So, would love to hear a little bit about your own personal story and how you have kind of found your passion and were able to act on it.
So, like I said in the beginning, it was a complex process for me, just like
Mhm.
many, because we're kind of going through the world. I call it with a certain level of inner blindness, right? So our eyes face outwards. So it makes sense that we understand our external worlds more than our internal worlds, right?
Mhm.
But I think for me, it's a longer story, but I'll try to condense it. I was in the corporate world for a very long time, and I was in the sales world. So I used to work for a very large electronics company. It's a 50 global company brand, as the national sales manager for that. And don't get me wrong, like there were aspects of that job that I really loved. And there were things that I intrinsically was very good at, because the more you do something, the better you become at it, right?
Yeah.
But there came a time where I was growing in that career and I was just like, this isn't for me. Like I knew at the seat of my soul that there was something else I was supposed to do, but I wasn't paying
Mhm.
attention to it because it's easier to pay the bills when you have something
Yeah.
that you do that, something stable, something secure. But as I grew, a lot of different complex things happened, and eventually I wound up getting sick. So this is not a unique story. Like vast majority of people that launch something, it's like there is some sort of pain that that happens,
Yeah.
that level of discomfort and that tension that's strong enough for you to start looking inward, right? So I actually got obsessed about this, because I was, in a position where I was a little desperate. Like I wanted to get better. I wanted to feel better. Being sick sucks. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, no one wants to be there, right? And I wanted to learn how I got there. I wanted to learn what were not only the things I did, but systemically, why did I like value those things for so long? And why, like, I knew that I wasn't supposed to be doing this. Why did I keep saying, I'll just do this for one more year? 10
Mhm.
year for 10 years, like that's ridiculous. It made no logical or rational sense to me. So anyways, the more I studied, the more I started to geek out. The more I geek out, the more curious I got, the more interesting things got, and I just like became insanely passionate about this. So again, it was something that was very meaningful to me because it
Mhm.
needed to get done. There was a high level of urgency and importance, and it just so happens that you know people science is something that I've always loved doing from since I was a child. So it just like started to self-assemble, but it wouldn't have self-assembled if there wasn't some catalyst for me. So that was my
Yeah.
catalyst.
Yeah, and I think that's good for people to keep in mind too, when you find yourself in a position that's not a great one, that really is an opportunity to change things, and it can be a catalyst is a great word for it.
Yeah, it really is. And like, I think back then, I'm not going to lie, like it didn't feel comfortable at all.
Mhm.
Uh, very discomforting. But on the other side of that, you see that when you lean into these things, when you lean into your pain, there's so much wisdom that comes out
Mhm.
of that if you allow that wisdom to surface. And it's really about, again, going through and really doing the work. And it is a lot of work. It's not something that you just all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, ta-da, I'm right.
Yes.
But I think you value it because there's a lot of work. You value it more. So
Mhm.
that's what intrinsically drives the passion eventually. And then when the more I did it, obviously it was helpful that I started to really recognize a societal gap that I wanted to. Like it just became a singular focus and a singular mission. And it was like this idea of using my own pain to help someone else or maybe prevent someone else's pain. Like that is a
Mhm.
high motivator in itself. So there's a ton of different angles that were pulled from that just was the perfect storm for me, and why I think I feel for the first time in my life just a completeness, like a level of alignment that I that I'm just very blessed and fortunate I found. And now I'm just like excited because when you're there, you're like, oh my God. everyone to feel this. Like everyone just needs to come on this side of the ship. Like it's really fun over here. So yeah, it's one of those.
That's amazing. And last question for you. Would love to hear a little bit about what it was like moving from the corporate world into entrepreneurship for you, because that's a big change.
I'm telling you, no one prepares you for this stuff. Like, um, I so when I came from a world that was very structured, where you have teams of people that all have amazing talents that help you accomplish great things. So things can move fast, and there's also downsides to that and frustrations and all that kind of stuff. But the positive thing is that you really just need to focus on one thing and just like bullseye it, right?
Yeah.
And then also the other thing is that when people ask you, because still what we do is such a big part of what we value in society, right? It's one of the three things that people ask you is, what's your name?
Yeah.
Where are you from? What do you do?
Yeah.
So, being a national sales manager or whatever, like I could explain that to people. People understood what that meant and the conversation would continue. And you didn't have people kind of doing head tilts or furrowing their brows, right? And then so you leave that world of complete certainty and complete security where you're like, this is who I am, this is my identity. All of a sudden to being like, oh shit, like, sorry, I don't know who I am. Like, what do you do? Good question. I'm trying to figure that out too. Like, it's just people are confused by that, and they're not expecting it, and I wasn't expecting it. So there was this complete identity of mine that I needed to break down in order to rebuild, and that also is very uncomfortable. And very uncertain, and there's a ton of things that you don't know, so you're constantly learning, and you're doing scary shit every day.
Yeah.
Things that I don't want to speak in front of 200 people today. That scares me, but you've got to do it, because if you don't, people aren't gonna your business fails. So it's like there's a whole bunch of other things that I did not expect. So really, literally, it is jumping and building your wings on the way down. But the support community in the entrepreneurship community, I've got to say, is like nothing I've ever seen in my life. Like there's some brilliant, amazing, supportive people that come out of the woodworks. You have no idea what to expect. You just let yourself fall, and there's always something there to buffer that fall. Always. Like I have not. It's always scarier in our minds because our minds aren't wired to know what that looks like. But once you get out and do it, this universe is an amazing thing. Amazing thing. It's like magic. Yeah. I say that to people all the time. But it's beautiful. I've been fortunate, and at the other side of it, again, you get used to this, you adapt to this. But there's a certain amount of liberation and freedom that that makes it all worth it at the end. So keep moving it forward.
Yeah, such cool insights. Really appreciate you sharing your story. I love hearing people's stories in particular. So we're unfortunately out of time, but would love to have you talk a little bit about the gift that you want to offer to listeners today.
Yes. So I am going to be doing a free 1-hour strategy session with anyone that's in a place where either you don't know or you're unclear about what your next moves are, what your passions are, and you really want to kind of go in alignment or you value feeling that level of fulfillment. So it's going to be a $150 gift, which covers you for the session. And then in the session, we're going to do some crazy insights that will get you in the direction that you need to be going if that's the situation that you're presently in right now.
Awesome. And then where can people find you online?
So I'm LinkedIn mostly. That's where I spend most of my time. But I'm also on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Instagram at both Kira Day and the Passion Center. Center is spelled with R-E, not E-R.
Yeah.
And then obviously my website is www.passioncenter.com.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time and insights, Kira. It's been really lovely chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a lot of fun. And I love what you're doing, Jess. So keep doing it.
Thank you.
And yeah, looking forward to seeing what else you've got up.
Thank you so much. And I will see the rest of you on our next interview.